Well, the latest report from Tracxn indicates that 2023 has been the lowest funded year in the last 5 years, with late stage and seed stage funding seeing a significant reduction. Neha Singh is the co-founder of Tracxn, now joins in with some insights from this report. Neha, good to have you on board. With about $7 billion in fundings received so far this year, clearly it's been the worst that we've seen in the last 5 years. What are the findings indicating?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. Yes, so the funding in 2023 is about $7 billion. It is one of the lowest that it has been the last few years. And even if you compare it to last year, it's a nearly 70% drop from 2022. And if you compare it to a peak of 2021, it's nearly 80% drop. So yes, I think the the funding winter sort of signifies this year, and we are effectively back to the 2015 and 16 levels.
So Neha, what about late stage funding and seed stage funding? How much of a drop has that seen?
Yes, that is correct. So if you look at across the different stages, the late stage has seen the most drop as compared to the early stage. So if you just take the late stage, there the drop is more than 70%. If you take the seed stage, it is lesser to about 60%. So that is a thing that you see across stages, and as well as another indicator is, for instance, the number of new unicorns that got created in India. So if you look at this 2023 year, only 2 new companies got added to the unicorn club versus 23 in the last year, or as compared to over 40 in 2021, which is the peak year, right? So this is another indicator of the drop that has happened in the late stage. And I would say in terms of the trend that you see, India tech sort of is in line with the global tech. So even in globally, if you look at the overall funding, that has seen a decline, and the trend is sort of similar, that the late stage there is more decline as compared to the early stage.
Well, given that fintech has been one of the top funded sectors in the country, we've seen an increased smartphone penetration, a lot of push towards the cashless economy as well. Has that really bolstered well for fintech in the year 2023?
So in terms of the sector, if you see, the ones that have performed better than the other ones are, like, fintech is one of the 3 sectors. And in addition to that, there's retail and enterprise applications. So fintech is, companies like Porfios or PhonePe, they were able to sort of raise large rounds. And, so that continues to be one area of focus of investors, that they continue to see, interesting deals which is happening in fintech. And there's also initiatives which is from the government, which is there in this sector, which is also accelerating the activity which is happening, in the space.
And which are some of the other sectors that have fallen out of favor when it comes to funding?
Yeah, so I would say if you look at the other sectors, consumer apart from brands, that is one of the sectors which had been hit. Obviously, sectors like EdTech, which had seen a peak in 2021, they were one of the impacted ones. So these are some of the sectors which saw more impact than some of the other ones. Having said that, there are also some green shoots of sectors which are seeing initial interest in terms of more emerging sectors, which had not seen a lot of fundings earlier, which are now seeing funding. Include sectors like environment tech, especially within that EV, across the whole value chain, be it across electric scooters or battery technology. There you saw a lot of investments happen in companies like an Ola Electric or a Ather or Blue Smart or a Battery Smart, right? So that is one sector. Another sector which was in the deep tech, which also saw investor interest, is space tech, wherein companies like a Pixel or a Skyroot, Agniroot, Cool were able to raise rounds in this year.
Since you brought this up, I would just want to understand how Indian tech fares versus some of the global tech performance. What have we seen in the year gone by?
Yeah, so if you compare the India tech funding scenario to the global funding scenario, it is actually very similar. So even in the global funding, the global funding was about 200 billion in 2023 year to date, which is about 50% drop from last year. And if you compare it to a peak year of 2021, this was nearly 70% drop, right? So, and you saw a similar story, in that. The reasons are sort of similar. If you look at the increase in interest rates and the global slowdown which has happened, which has impacted both companies in the public tech stock as well as in the private. Those are the broad reasons which are sort of similar, which have sort of impacted companies, across the private and the public realm. Having said that, there are few aspects which are particular to the private markets, which is especially in terms of the valuation mismatch, that you saw in the late stage. So in terms of the late stage, there were a lot of investors that were sitting on high amounts of dry powder looking to sort of deploy. And one of the things that they were waiting for is the valuations to correct. Because unlike in the public tech, wherein the valuations correct much sooner, in the private markets, the companies can actually delay the fundraise, and hence the valuation can take much longer time to sort of correct. So this was also one of the reasons that a lot of the late stage funds were looking to sort of deploy, were sitting on dry powder, but were waiting for some of the valuation correction to happen. And now, since it has been a few quarters, I think there you see some gap being bridged.
And give us a sense as well as to how the exit snapshot looks, which have been some of the major exits in the year?
Yeah, so in terms of exits, both on the M&A and the IPO, you saw slightly softer activity as compared to last year. On the M&A, the number of deals were lesser than last year. Even in the IPO, though the IPO markets is, at an all-time high with the number of IPOs happening, which is at record levels. In the tech space, you saw lesser number of IPOs this year as compared to last year. You obviously had the large IPOs like a Mamaearth, etc. But there were, in terms of number, they were slightly lesser, softer than last year.
You've also, Neha, had the likes of PhonePe, Zepto, Lenskart. Take us through the list of which have been some of the top funded companies.
Yes, so some of the companies include in sectors, within fintech, you had companies like a Perfuse or a PhonePe raise large rounds. Within retail, you had brands like Lenskart raise rounds. In other sectors, you had, within EV, you had companies like Ola Electric, Ather, raise rounds.